Hi, I'm Dr. Sian Cole, and in this video, I'm going to be explaining acceptance in the context of acceptance and commitment therapy. So, what do you mean, acceptance? Being a clinical and health psychologist, I've heard this many times before. I can't accept that I have cancer, or I can't accept that I need to have a major operation, and so on. And I think so too sometimes. It does seem too unfair. However, this video will hopefully help give you some understanding about how psychologists and acceptance and commitment therapy practitioners use acceptance as a therapeutic tool. Acceptance refers to a fundamental psychological process that involves making room for one's thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations, and life circumstances without unnecessary resistance or judgment. It is a key component of acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, that aims to enhance psychological flexibility and promote meaningful behaviour change. So here are some common explanations of acceptance. The first one is the value of acceptance: to be open and accepting of myself, others, and the world that is out of my personal control. The second one is the act of acceptance: opening yourself fully to the experience as it is, not necessarily as your mind says it is. And the third explanation explains that you can come to terms, accept your struggle, and still have a meaningful life. In ACT, acceptance is an essential precursor to commitment. Once individuals have accepted their internal experiences, they are better equipped to commit to actions that align with their values and lead to a more fulfilling life. Acceptance and commitment work hand in hand to promote psychological well-being and help individuals live a more meaningful and purposeful life. Imagine you're in a tug of war with some huge anxiety monster or whatever emotion monster that suits you with your situation, such as depression or anger. And you've got one end of the rope and the monster has the other end. And in between you, there's a huge black bottomless pit. And you're pulling backwards on the road as hard as you can because you want to try and pull them into that black bottomless pit and never see them again. But the monster keeps pulling you closer as well. So what's the best thing to do in this situation? You might say, pull harder. And that is what comes naturally. But the harder you pull, the harder the monster pulls. You're stuck and it's hard to focus on anything else or do anything else because you're stuck in this tug of war. So what do you do next? Drop the rope. When you drop the rope, the monster's still there, but you're no longer tied up in the struggle with it. Now you can do something more useful than be stuck in the endless tug of war. Acceptance is about letting go with the struggle. So why do we practice acceptance? It helps you to let go of the struggle because we know that struggling with emotions, etc., that are out of our personal control actually adds to our suffering. As it is a fight, we will never win. It's futile. And it takes up a lot of time and energy, and then we get upset about that. Cultivating acceptance helps us to engage with reality, what the experience is, so we can then set goals, make action plans, and act more effectively. This helps us then act more consistently with our values and needs and helps individuals cultivate a greater sense of psychological flexibility and resilience. Acceptance is a key component of ACT, but it is often misunderstood. Sometimes in English, accept means to tolerate or resign yourself, as in, oh, gee, I guess I have to accept that. But that is precisely not what is meant here. By accept, we mean something more like taking completely in the moment without defense. Willingness is a synonym for acceptance. Acceptance is not about liking or wanting. Acceptance does not imply that you have to like or want the difficult thoughts, emotions, or circumstances you're experiencing. It's not about passively resigning yourself to your situation or giving up on making positive changes. Acceptance means acknowledging and making room for these experiences regardless of your preferences. Acceptance is also not toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is about being positive in thoughts and feelings regardless of current situation. This is not acceptance. Sometimes it is appropriate to cry and feel sad and have a pajama day. Our society sometimes sells this message to people that they should look on the bright side or everything will be all right and don't worry. Toxic positivity is the belief that we should put a positive spin on all experiences. And this can silence and demean people's true experience and make people feel pressure to pretend to feel ways they do not. It is very similar to ignoring or dismissing emotions, which again is not acceptance. In fact, acceptance is the opposite. We are open to our experience, including the emotions that go with it. Some ACT textbooks assert that acceptance is an all or nothing state. You are either accepting or you aren't. It's black or white with no shades of grey. However, there are many shades of grey. Dr. Russ Harris believes there are levels of acceptance. He uses the example when anxiety shows up, you can acknowledge it, allow it, sit with it, make room for it, lean into it, or embrace it. And these terms convey different degrees of acceptance. And I find it a whole lot easier to acknowledge anxiety than to embrace it. Acceptance is not a one-time event. Acceptance is an ongoing process rather than a one-time achievement. It requires continuous practice and effort to cultivate a mindset of acceptance. It's not something you accomplish once and expect all your difficulties to disappear. Instead, it's a way of relating to your experiences that become a part of your daily life. This is why we practice cultivating acceptance. Acceptance is not about letting others get away with abusive behaviour. You do not have to accept people treating you badly or with poor behaviour. Acceptance is not about avoiding responsibility. Acceptance does not absolve you of your responsibility for your actions or the consequences of your choices. It's not an excuse to avoid taking accountability for your behaviours. Instead, acceptance helps you to take a clear and honest look at your situation, including your own role in it, and make conscious choices based on your values. Here are a couple of metaphors I use to explain acceptance. Both of these come from Dr. Russ Harris. Quicksand and the struggle switch. Have you ever seen one of those old movies where the bad guy falls into a pool of quicksand and the more he struggles, the faster it sucks him under? And if you should ever fall into quicksand, struggling is the worst thing you can possibly do. What you're supposed to do is lie back, spread your arms and lie as still as possible, floating for the surface. Then maybe whistle for your horse to come and rescue you. Acting effectively in this situation is tricky. because every instinct tells you to try to escape. But if you don't stop struggling, pretty soon you'll sink beneath the surface. Sure, it's not fun to be floating on quicksand, but it does beat drowning in it. And this same principle applies to difficult feelings. The more we try to fight them, the more they smother us. Now, why should that be? Well, imagine that at the back of your mind is a switch. We'll call it the struggle switch. And when it's switched on, it means we're going to struggle against any physical or emotional pain that comes our way. Whatever discomfort we experience, we'll try to get rid of it or avoid it. For instance, suppose the emotion that shows up is anxiety. If our struggle switch is on, that means that this feeling is completely unacceptable. So we could end up with anger about anxiety. How dare you make me feel this way? Or sadness about our anxiety. Not again, this is tragic. Or anxiety about anxiety. This can't be good for me. I wonder what it's doing to my body. Or guilt about anxiety. Shouldn't let myself get so worked up. I should know better. Once again, I'm acting like a child. Or maybe even a mixture of all of these feelings at once. What all these secondary emotions have in common is that they are unpleasant, unhelpful, and drain upon our energy and vitality. And then we get angry or anxious or depressed about that. Spot the vicious cycle? Now, imagine what happens if our struggle switch is off. In this case, whatever emotion shows up, no matter how unpleasant, we don't struggle with it. Thus, when anxiety shows up, it's not a problem. Sure, it's unpleasant and we don't like it very much, but it's nothing terrible. With the struggle switch off, our anxiety levels are free to rise and fall as the situation dictates. Sometimes they'll be high, sometimes low, and sometimes there'll be no anxiety at all. But most importantly, we're not wasting our time and energy struggling with it. Without struggle, what we get is the natural level of physical and emotional discomfort, depending on who we are and the situation we're in. In ACT, we call this clean discomfort. There's no avoiding clean discomfort. Life serves it up to us all in one way or another. But once we start struggling with it, our discomfort levels rapidly increase, and all this additional suffering we call dirty discomfort. Our struggle switch is like an emotional amplifier. Switch it on and we can have anger about anxiety, anxiety about our anger, depression about our depression, or guilt about our guilt. We could even have guilt about our anger, about our anxiety, and then depression about that. But it doesn't stop there. With our struggle switch on, we are completely unwilling to accept the presence of these uncomfortable feelings, which means that not only do we get emotionally distressed by them, we also do whatever we can to get rid of them or distract ourselves from them. For some people, this means turning to drugs or alcohol, which then leads to addictions, relationship issues, and a whole host of other messy problems. Others may turn to food as a distraction, which can lead to obesity or eating disorders. Humans find an almost infinite number of ways to try and avoid or get rid of unpleasant feelings, from smoking to sex, from shopping to surfing the internet. And as I often discuss with my clients, these control strategies are no big deal as long as we use them in moderation. But any of them can become problematic if used excessively. For example, I've had clients who've damaged their health by avoiding doctor's appointments and adhering to treatment. So all these secondary problems and the painful feelings associated with them fall under the heading dirty discomfort. The next metaphor is two countries at war. And this one really helps show the difference between that kind of resignation and acceptance. Imagine you live in a small country that shares a border with a hostile neighbour. There is long-standing tension between the two countries. The neighbouring country has a different religion and a different political system, and your country sees it as a major threat. There are three possible scenarios for how your country can relate to its neighbour. The worst case scenario is war. Your country attacks, the other one retaliates, or vice versa. And as both countries get pulled into a major war, the people of both nations suffer. As both countries get pulled into a major war, the people of both nations suffer. And you can think of any major war and the huge costs involved in terms of life, money, and well-being. Another scenario, better than the first, but still far from satisfactory, is a temporary truce. Both countries agree to a ceasefire, but there is no reconciliation. Resentment seethes beneath the surface, and there is that constant underlying threat that war will break out again. And you could just think of like North Korea and South Korea. The third possibility is genuine peace. You acknowledge your differences and allow them just to be. You don't get rid of the other country, nor does it mean that you necessarily like it or even want it there, nor does it mean that you approve of its politics or religion. But because you're no longer at war, you can now use your money and resources to build up the infrastructure of your own country instead of squandering them on the battlefield. The first scenario, war, is like the struggle to get rid of unwanted thoughts and feelings. It's a battle that can never be won, and it consumes a huge amount of time and energy. The second scenario, a truce, is definitely better, but it's still a long way from true acceptance. It's more like a grudging tolerance. There's no sense of moving forward to a new future. Although there is no active warfare, the hostility remains and you are resigned to the ongoing tension. A grudging tolerance of thoughts and feelings is better than outright struggle, but it leaves you feeling stuck and somewhat helpless. It's a sense more of resignation than acceptance, of entrapment rather than freedom, of being stuck rather than moving forward. The third scenario, peace, represents true acceptance. Notice that in this scenario, your country doesn't have to like the other country, approve of it being there, convert to its religion, or learn to speak its language. You simply make peace with them. You acknowledge your differences. You give up trying to change their politics or religion, and you focus your efforts on making your own country a better place to live. And it's the same when you truly accept your uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. You don't have to like them, want them, or approve of them. You simply make peace with them and let them be. This leaves you free to focus your energy on taking action that moves your life forward in a direction you value. So how do we cultivate acceptance? Firstly, I want to note that it is not a passive skill. Acceptance is an active and ongoing process. Some days are easier than others, and we can accept that too. So start with observing your experience, noticing your thoughts, feelings, sensations as they are. Imagine you're struggling with anxiety. Acceptance in this context would involve acknowledging and allowing your anxious thoughts and feelings to be present rather than fighting against them. You might say to yourself, I notice that anxiety is present with me right now. That's okay. It's a natural part of being human. Breathe. Use your breath to anchor to your body and the present moment. Allow. Let go of the struggle. Drop the rope. Make room for your unpleasant emotions. Make room for the clean discomfort. Any type of mindfulness practice is a step towards practicing acceptance. However, mindfulness of emotions can be a helpful way to practice acceptance of emotions using some mental imagery of your emotions and their associated body sensations. It is also great for people who are good at visualizing. So here's a quick little acceptance imagery work to do. First, scan your body and pick the sensation that bothers you the most. Observe it in a way a curious scientist might. Now visualize that sensation as an object. What is the size and shape of it? Is it liquid, solid, or gaseous? Is it transparent or opaque? What color is it? Does the color vary? What is its temperature? Is it light, heavy, or weightless? How does the surface feel to the touch? Rough, smooth, wet, dry, sticky, spiky, hot, cold? Is there any sound associated with it? Is there any vibration, pulsation, or movement within it? Is its position fixed or shifting? Take a few slow, calm breaths. Breathe into and around this object. Make room for it. Allow this object to be there, to stay where it is. Let go of trying to push it out. You don't have to like it. Just let it be. Don't try to get rid of the object and don't try to alter it. If it changes by itself, that's okay. If it doesn't change, that's okay too. The aim is to accept it, not get rid of it. I have a longer video on mindfulness of emotions if you do want to practice that one. We've also got some things that we can just say to ourselves when we notice our uncomfortable thoughts or feelings. I don't have to like it, want it, or approve of it, to simply, whatever one works for you, breathe into it, soften up around it, so on. In summary, acceptance in act is a process of acknowledging and making room for your thoughts, emotions, and life circumstances without unnecessary resistance or judgment. It's about being present with your experiences, even the difficult ones, and choosing to act in ways that align with your values. Acceptance is not about liking or wanting, avoidance or suppression, resignation or giving up, or avoiding responsibility. Acceptance is often coupled with the concept of mindfulness in act. Mindfulness involves paying deliberate attention to the present moment without judgment. Through mindfulness, individuals can observe their experience with curiosity, openness, fostering an attitude of acceptance.